my friends, and welcome to my channel, Sysadmin Toolkit. And if this is the first time you're watching visiting my channel, please subscribe, check out my other videos. I really appreciate it. Alright, so today, with further ado, as you all know, I'm a big fan of security, computer security, um, anything that has to do with security, and it is my um, joy, my passion to add value to persons' lives who are in this same profession as I am, and those who are aspiring to enter the field of computer science. Alright, so we'll be looking at a very important aspect of security, and that is email security. And as we all know, this is one of those areas that are very sensitive, one of those areas that are very critical in terms of protecting. And it is also one of those areas that many organizations do get compromised from time to time. So, according to Fortinet, for those who are familiar with Fortinet, who is doing a great job in terms of designing security network appliances, right? In 2019, 94% of malware attacks were delivered via email. According to Verizon's DBIR data, the report also found that 34% of breaches came as a result of an insider threat. IoT devices face 5,200 attacks a month, while 1 in every 36 mobile devices has high-risk apps installed on it, according to Symantec's 2019 Internet Security Threat Reports Insights. The same Symantec research also found that 65% of attackers use spear phishing as their primary attack vector, and 1 in every 13 web requests lead to a malware infection. Right, and to me that's very alarming. With that in mind, we see how critical it is that as an organization, and even you as an individual, be aware of the threat landscape and the most common attack types that cyber criminals use to target their data, systems, networks, and also end users, which are in most cases the more vulnerable links in a network. So I'll be spending some time just to look further into ways in which we can, or to show you ways in which we can go about developing a strategy, understanding the landscape, what you're up against, in order to actually put the best mechanism or plan in place to help protect our organization as well as ourselves as it relates to email security. Right, so threats faced by organizations and how to enhance email security. Right, it's very important. Before we actually dive into looking at the how and the tools and all the mechanisms and the devices, right, it's very important that you understand what you're up against as a sysadmin or a security professional. Right, it's very important that you understand what email security is all about. Alright, so I'm not taking it for granted that we are all familiar with what email security is, just in case I might have some newbies watching this video, or at least you would have an understanding, as I always like to lay the foundations, right? Not taking anything for granted. Right, so that's one of the things about being a security or network professional is that you will never assume things. You always try to understand the basis, whereby you can always tear down and rebuild. Right, so email security can be looked upon as a concept or a procedure that protects email content and accounts against unauthorized access. Right, this includes things like login security, spam filtering, user security, employee education, and email encryption. Right, most email attacks are more prevalent and sophisticated than ever before. Therefore, threat actors recognize that email is the preferred method for confidential business communications, as well as an essential asset that organizations cannot afford to lose access to for even a day. And we all know how miserable and frustrating that can be in terms of communication within networks. Right, so it is no surprise that 90, as I mentioned before, 90 to 94% of cyber attacks are initiated via email. Right, so when you really look at email security, it's pretty much a way of protecting sensitive information in email communication, right? And accounts to secure against unauthorized access, loss, or compromise. Right? So email is often used to spread malware, spam, and phishing attacks. Right? And just to add some additional info on that is that scammers normally or fraudulently entice recipients to part with sensitive information, open attachments, or click on hyperlinks that install malware on the victim's devices. Right? Email is also a common entry point for attackers looking to gain a foothold in an enterprise network and obtain valuable company data. And we would have heard about many instances, many companies that have been compromised in this, using this sort of an attack or medium to attack. Many businesses either believe that their email is, and this is what causes a lot of problem. A lot of businesses believe that their email is adequately secured, when in reality it is not, or feel that they are, I mean, in most cases, they are too small to be targeted by an attacker. That's the assumption a lot of times. Nobody wants to attack me. And there lies the vulnerability. It is misconceptions like these that leave organizations vulnerable to attack, and the losses decrease productivity and ruin reputations that often ensue. Other organizations are aware that they are inadequately protected, but fail to recognize that the fact that they cannot afford to be without effective email protection. Right? So I'll be breaking down the modern email threat landscape for us to have an understanding of what we are up against as system admins, right? Understanding what we're up against. That's very critical to developing the best or the most effective strategies, or the best put the best mechanisms or systems in place to help to mitigate against these elements that are normally used to target our organizations. Right? So before you can actually protect or implement measures to protect against email attacks, you will agree with me that you must first know what you're up against. Right? You must first know what you are up against. Right? You can't protect unless you know what exists and have an understanding of what actually exists. Right? So I am just here to create an awareness for each of these. Then it's always good to do further research to understand, not on the surface, to say, yeah, phishing attack is XYZ, but to get to the bottom of all of these elements, to see how they are actually designed, how they operate, how they actually execute an attack, right? So using a scientific approach, right, is always good in terms of becoming exceptional as a network professional, getting to the bottom of things to understand all the pieces fit together. Then you are better able to put mechanisms that will help to mitigate to a great extent in protecting your organization, and most importantly the asset, the company's data, which is very critical to its operation. Alright, so one of the first ones that we want to look at is phishing. Right, and for many of us these are just refreshers, as you would have heard about to some extent what these are all about. Right, so let's quickly look at each of these elements, and we'll be getting to ways in which we can develop policies, best practices, looking at applications and software that we can actually use within our organizations to help with such attacks that we will face at some point in time. Right, so these are my approaches to email security. But before I even jump to my approaches, let us quickly dive into each of these to have an understanding. So phishing is an attack variation in which threat actors send malicious emails designed to trick users into falling for a scam. That's pretty much right. An attack variation in which a threat actor sends malicious emails designed to trick users into falling for a scam. And normally the motive behind a phishing campaign is usually to get people to reveal financial information, credentials, or some other valuable sensitive data. Phishing is extremely prevalent simply because it is cheap, easy, and effective to actually simulate, and there are many platforms out there that can be used to do this effectively. For these reasons, phishing is currently the most commonly used attack vector on organizations, right? And this has led to 53% of all cyber security breaches. Phishing campaigns are virtually free to carry out, but can be extremely costly to their victims, often resulting in data loss, identity theft, or malware infections. Right, the other one that we hear about from time to time is spear phishing. This is a highly targeted variation of phishing in which attackers send fraudulent emails that appear to be from a known or trusted sender in order to obtain sensitive information. Spear phishing is becoming an increasingly popular method of attack against, because it is generally more successful than conventional phishing, pretty much. As opposed to sending maybe hundreds or thousands of relatively generic emails out at a time, spear phishing campaigns involve researching victims and utilizing advanced social engineering techniques and intelligence strategies to compose fewer, more convincing messages. Alright. Whaling. Whaling is another form of phishing designed to target high-profile executives, right? Or whales, when you think about the top of the food chain, and manipulate victims into authorizing high-value wire transfers to the attacker. Right? So unlike traditional phishing campaigns, whaling doesn't really involve employees clicking on links, right? In cases like phishing, or becoming infected with malware. Instead, the goal of a whaling attack is to trick an individual into disclosing sensitive information through the use of social engineering, email spoofing, and website spoofing. Right? And those are other elements that we can actually deep dive into in terms of social engineering, email spoofing, website spoofing. Right? Those are actually even topics of themselves that you can actually look into as you seek to do further research to better equip yourself to deal with these elements of attack that will come against your organization. Right? We hear about also BEC, that's business email compromise. Right? And now, normally in this sort of attack, a threat actor obtains access to a corporate email account and sends fraudulent emails under the identity of the account's owner in order to steal money from the company or its employees, partners, or customers. Right? BEC is becoming increasingly common and costly. Right? Very important. One of the other ones that we have to deal with is malware. And malware encompasses all software designs. And many of us are more familiar with malware. Right? So this is normally takes into account all software designed to disrupt, damage, or gain access to a computer system. Right? Malware can form various detrimental functions, which include encrypting or deleting sensitive data, stealing, hijacking, or altering central computing functions, and monitoring users' activity without their permission. Malware attacks can have serious consequences for businesses. According to a report that I saw, it says that according to Accenture, the average cost in lost productivity of a malware attack is 50 days. An amount of downtime that would have severe repercussions for any business. And you can just imagine that when you need to deliver services at an organization and you're unable to. Right? They always say that time is money. Right? And how much reputation of a company can be destroyed, or the value of a company. Right? Although different types of malware have different methods of proliferating and infecting computers, a great majority of malware is delivered via the element of an email. And when you really do a deep dive into email in of itself, back in the day, was just designed for the purpose of just sending data. So the one mechanism or the design to email is not so much around security, but more so communication. Right? And to date, it has been very challenging to really build security into, but rather you have to put mechanisms that actually protects the sending and receiving of data. Right? Put mechanism that builds a perimeter security around this mechanism that we use to send emails, whichever the application that we use. Right? We want to look at 6 ransomware. Right? And this is very big in the market. Right? And I've actually experienced situations with malware and ransomware in organizations that I've worked before. Right? And one of the greatest mechanisms to dealing with these attacks, even if you find yourself a victim, is to, one of the key things is to ensure that you have backup, very good backup, right? Backup that you test recovering data from time to time. So even if you're not able to even get your systems back up in time, the key is to always have good data, reliable, and up-to-date data that is backed up and tested on a consecutive or constant basis. Very key. One of the most key things to any systems is to have good backup mechanisms, procedures in place to restore your data from. Alright, so ransomware is a specific type of malware designed to block access to a computer system until a sum of money in the form of untraceable Bitcoin is paid. It does this by encrypting a victim's files until they have made the payment demanded by the attacker. And over the past year, we have been hearing a lot about ransomware. Right? So ransomware attacks from phishing emails have increased by an alarming 109%. Right? And the report says that in 2018, 1 in 3 small to medium-sized businesses worldwide were hit by ransomware, and 1 in 5 were forced to shut down operations completely until the infection was removed. Data also shows that the majority of small businesses are not able to recover from an attack. Right? 60% of SMBs, that's right, small to medium-sized businesses, goes out of business within 6 months of getting hit with a ransomware. Right? And that's very devastating. And right, so we have unsolicited, what's the other one we have here? We have spam, right? And spam normally looks at a lot of emails that normally are sent to our inboxes from time to time. Normally not with malicious intents, but also it could be for malicious purposes, right? Normally you go on websites, click on links here and there, and then your mailbox is flooded with a lot of spam, right? The other one is computer viruses, right? So computer viruses, and a computer virus is a type of malware which replicates and spread by modifying other computer programs and inserting its own code. Computer viruses are extremely prevalent and can compromise sensitive information. Right? Sensitive information that destroy data, harm hardware, and waste lots of time, resources, and energy in terms of recovering. Email viruses, which constitute the majority of computer viruses, can be activated when a user either clicks on a link, downloads an attachment, or interact in some other way with the body of an infected email. Sorry about that. Now, zero-day attacks refers to a scenario in which threat actors exploit a vulnerability before developers have had the chance to release a fix for it. And these attacks occur without users' knowledge and can carry hefty costs for businesses in the form of data theft, system downtime, lost productivity, damaged reputations, and regulatory actions. According to the Sponimam Institute, 37% of attacks that targeted businesses in 2018 were zero-day attacks, a 48% increase. Right? So pretty much this is the landscape that we are dealing with as system administrators, network admins, security professionals, that we have to put mechanisms in place to deal with effectively. Right? So once you have the basis covered, once you have an understanding of these attacks that exist, then you can actually proceed further in putting things in place. Right? So this is my approach to email security. Right? I'm very systematic in how I put things in place, and it's always good to develop your own strategies of going about to put the best plans in place. Right? At times it's not about having the fastest or the best vehicle. Right? I normally say that it's not about the fastest vehicle that wins a race, but the driver and the experience that the driver has and the approach that he or she uses that normally gives that individual the victory on the racetrack. And the same approach you have. At times a lot of organizations spends a lot of money on enterprise applications, but they are not effectively utilized. Right? So it's always good to have good strategies, and at times it's just some very simple things, yet very effective things, um, that can be used and that are used to make a system very hardened or less vulnerable to attacks and compromise. Right? So I now I look at putting an email security policy in place. Right? Look at your policies and know what it is that you want your policies to be designed. And then from there you can actually look at implementing various solutions that can make into effect these policies. Right? So because email is so critical in today's business world, organizations, right, it's very imperative that organizations establish policies or have established policies around how to handle um, this information flow, right? As you know, email is normally one of the platforms through which information flows within an organization, right? One of the first policies that you want to implement in an organization is to establish um, viewing contents or policies around the viewing contents of email flowing through your email servers, right? So it's very important to understand what is in the entire email in order to act appropriately, right? After these baseline policies are put into effect, an organization can enact various security policies on those emails. So these email policies or email security policies can be as simple, right? It's always important to start from simple to advanced, right? The less complicated a system or process is, then it's the more hardened that system can become, right? At that time when we had too many complications, that is where the loopholes actually lies, because at times the system becomes so confused in terms of how it functions, then it's prone to attacks. So these email security policies can be as simple as removing all executable content, right, from emails to more in-depth actions, like sending suspicious content to a sandboxing tool for delayed analysis, right? And you can do some further research on sandboxing. There are very number of applications that can be used, but in a nutshell, a sandbox is like a control environment in which you can actually see what takes place without affecting. You can actually run malicious code and see how it affects a system without actually create damage to your actual production, right? So if security incidents are detected by these policies, the organization needs to have actionable intelligence about the scope of the attack. Right? This will help determine what damage the attack may have caused. Once an organization has visibility into all the emails being sent, they can enforce email encryption policies, right, to prevent sensitive email information from falling into the wrong hands. Right? So at least you're seeing a methodology in place and how you can actually take this in steps to fully implement that system. Alright, so put your policies in place, and then once you develop your policies, look at all the various pieces. Right? When you think about policies, other email security policies, things that you'd want to put in writing, right? Structure these things. Things like, may employees use email accounts for non-business related email, right? Must employees include a disclaimer? Must they, right, encrypt and sign messages, right? What restrictions apply to sending email? What if any attachment types are things like those? You want to put these in place, and then to see what application or what system can be implemented to ensure that these policies are implemented within your organization. Alright, let's just look at some email security best practices that we can implement within our organization. Right? Now, when you talk about email best practices, There are a number of options, right? A number of things that can be done. But one of the first best practices that I normally look at, right? Best practices is that an organization should put into effect, right? Is implementing a secure email gateway. Very important, right? A secure email gateway. And this can be either in the form of a software appliance or hardware appliance. Right? An email gateway normally scans and processes all incoming and outgoing email and makes sure that threats are not allowed in. And in my description, I put in a link to the resources provided here so that you can do your further research. Right? I will also be looking at a number of email gateways, very popular email gateways and applications that can also be used within your organizations, and some that I've actually implemented for organizations that are proven very effective. Right? So an email gateway scans and processes all incoming and outgoing email and makes sure that the threats are not allowed in once it is configured properly, that is. Because attacks are increasingly sophisticated, standard security measures such as blocking known bad file attachments are no longer effective. Right? A better solution is to deploy a secure email gateway that uses a multi-layered approach. Right? A multi-layered is simple, using various mechanisms, right, that you actually have to go through in order to, or a mail has to pass a test before it can actually be delivered to its recipient. Right? It's important to also deploy an automated email encryption solution as a best practice. Right? This solution should be able to analyze all outbound email traffic to determine whether the material is sensitive. If the content is sensitive, it needs to be encrypted before it is emailed to the intended recipient, which will prevent attackers from viewing emails even if they were to intercept. Right? And also, thirdly, is to that the training of employees, right? An appropriate email usage. I know in what is a good and bad email is also as important best practice for email security, right? So, as we all know, users may receive a malicious email that slips through the secure email gateway. So it's critical that they understand what to look for, right? Most often they are exposed to phishing attacks, which have telltale signs, which we all know about. So training employees helps in spotting emails and reporting them can actually add a lot of value. So there we have about 3 effective strategies that we can, our best practice to end users being trained, right? Putting a email gateway in place as well as email encryption, right? Now, looking at that, what actually constitutes an effective email security strategy? So after you develop your policies, you look at best practices, right? Then you want to see how it is that you can make your email security strategy effective, right? So in order to actually develop an effective email strategy, right? An email security strategy, right? For an email security strategy to be effective, right? Protecting against modern email threats requires a comprehensive, and as I mentioned before, multi-layered approach to email security that goes beyond what traditional antivirus software or spam filtering frameworks alone can offer. Right? So defense in depth is essential in combating today's advanced email attacks, as no individual security feature is sufficient in identifying and taking down threat actors' sophisticated campaigns. Right? So working in unison with an advanced business cloud email security solution, right, these various layers of security are more effective at preventing successful email attacks than any single method of protection alone. Right? So there's no one solution. It's always a combination of two that has to work in tandem with each other to actually develop that effective strategy within any organization. Right? Security awareness training and employee education, as I'd mentioned before, are also critical in preventing attacks. However, user behavior is, ultimately unpredictable. You train, but persons at times do not see the importance of the training that they receive. Right? Thus, implementing a centrally hosted and fully managed business email security solution is the best way to create a safeguarded environment around users and reduce the attack of human error. So that is the thing that you want to reduce or keep to minimal as best as possible. Right? Now, whatever solution is implemented must be modern, as I said before, multi-tiered architecture, right? In which individual security features work harmoniously to detect and combat threats in real time, right? Other elements that ensure that your security strategy is effective is to ensure that the solution implemented is scalable, right? Right, that simplifies deployment and increases availability. Right, zero, it has things like zero over outbreak control that protects against new unknown threats. Right, zero endpoint encryption using strong cryptography. Right, multiple leading antivirus engines. Right, spam filtering technologies. Right, something that has tighter security, adaptive implementation, and eliminate risk of vendor lock-in through the use of things like transparent collaborative development approach. Right, so those are some of the things that you can look at in terms of implementing an effective email strategy. Right. Now, the fourth on my list as a race to developing taking an approach to email security is what are end users' best practices for email security. Right. So having put everything into place, then you have to ensure that the end user, as I said before, end users are normally the most vulnerable links in any security that is implemented in organizations, right? So it's critical that end users are made aware of best practices, right? So while implementing a highly or a high quality business solution, the most effective way to mitigate your company's risk of suffering the potentially devastating aftermath of an attack. Right? There are some email security best practices that users within an organization should engage in to protect themselves, their information, and the company that they are a part of. Very important. So email security is necessary for both individuals and businesses. Email accounts, right? And there are multiple measures organizations should take to enhance email security, right? Which I will be sharing at this time. So in terms of best practices for email security, right? End users best practices that are, right? So users should be trained to be on the lookout for spoofed email addresses or names, right? Make sure that the sender's email addresses matches the company name and format exactly, right? I'm just looking at some of the best practice in terms of training, right? Training your end users, right? Helping them to understand how to refrain from clicking through links embedded in email messages, right? Having that ability to avoid opening potentially dangerous attachments that are included in emails. from unknown senders. Right, keeping an eye on out for phishing email. Right, having system in place that actually scan these emails before they get to the end users. Right, scan all attachments for malware. Right, keeping all mail clients and operating system web browsers up to date and patch. That cannot be overemphasized. Right, verify that the source of any suspicious email that you receive. Right, and always training your end users, put in policies that they will take the time to stop and fully think things through. Right, so these are some of the things that you can actually enforce in your end user email best practices for email security. Get your users aware and conscious of the landscape that exists through training and the effect and the consequences, right, when they are not alert as it relates to emails and what can be done. Right. Next thing that we want to quickly look into is email security tools, software or appliances. Right. So as I mentioned before, we have security policies, we have our best practices, we have looked at what constitutes an effective email strategy, end user best practices, and now we're looking at security tools or software appliances. Right, and I've mentioned before, establishing an email gateway. Right, I have a number of applications or hardware vendors that you can actually do research on automated email encryption. Right, now there are a number of tools or security gateways that can be implemented. Right, so quickly I'll be showing you just a list of those tools and software systems that you can use or you can actually do further research on in terms of implementing in your organization. Right, top level email security gateways. Right, I've worked with things like Spam Titan in the past. Right, I've worked with SolarWinds, Symantec, Microsoft have your own form of security gateway endpoints. Right, so these are a number of products that you can actually look at, right, to test or implement within your organization. Things like Proofpoint, we have Avanan, Spam Titan, right, SolarWinds, and the list goes on. Mimecast, Barracuda, Cisco Cloud. So we do have a number of applications, software applications, as well as hardware application, Fortinet, right, hardware applications, right. So there are a number of platforms that can be used to ensure that we have great email security within an organization. Right? Now, one of the greatest things that I emphasize as it relates to any system, for the effective use of any system, to ensure that your system is as safe as possible, no matter what investment is made in an organization. End user security awareness training is key. It's paramount to enforce and to ensure that you have top executives on board, persons that buy into your training awareness, that this can be a part of the culture of the organization that you work in. Once persons buy into the culture, once they buy into the importance of these security policies, to be aware what is at risk, the impact of not paying attention to emails, looking out for things like this, of constant training, email awareness training, what a phishing email look like, what a valid email should look like, spotting those things, then this is one of the greatest tools or strategies I could say, apart from the amazing systems that are out there on platforms. Right? All it takes is just one click. Just one click that destroys organizations. Right? So having all of these mechanisms in place that I've mentioned before, one of my greatest things is to always ensure that I've always done from my personal experiences to enforce end user security awareness training, and this should be done on a regular basis, that it becomes a part of um, their workflow within their organizations, become a part of their culture, that they appreciate the importance of this. Alright, so with that said, I hope that you have gained some additional insights, have added value to your skill sets, and then you will be now motivated and intrigued to do further research and to build on your knowledge base in terms of adding value to your organization. Alright, so please subscribe, please like, share, comments. Alright, and thank you for your time in watching this video.